John Lennon Murder Anniversary. On the evening of December 8, 1980, John Lennon, a former member of the Beatles and an advocate for global peace, was brutally killed outside of his home in New York City, the Dakota. This event resulted in the loss of one of the most cherished and significant characters in the history of the world. A tragic incident that will be remembered throughout the annals of cultural history is the untimely passing of John Lennon. The voice of a man whose work and activity had influenced millions of people all over the world was silenced as a result of a moment that helped keep his voice from being heard. In the beginning, that day seemed to be a routine one for John Lennon and his wife, Yoko Ono. However, it would turn out to be a day that was filled with tragic occurrences and a great deal of misery. Lennon, who had spent a substantial portion of the 1970s living a solitary life as a house husband and father to his little son Sean, had recently re-emerged in the public spotlight with the publishing of his first album in 5 years, which was titled Double Fantasy. This record was Lennon's first album in 5 years, a testament to the contentment that John Lennon felt regarding his personal life as well as his excitement for the future. The album was a celebration of love, family, and rebirth. It was a celebration of all three of these things. In the afternoon, he and Ono were spending time in the record plant studio where they were working on new songs with a great deal of passion. John Lennon discovered a fan named David Chapman, who was 25 years old at the time, as they were leaving the studio and making their way back to the Dakota in the early evening. Chapman was a fan of the band. In order to confront John Lennon, Chapman had traveled all the way from Hawaii for the sole intention of carrying out this mission. That particular morning, he had been waiting outside of the Dakota while clutching a copy of the book Double Fantasy. He was holding the book in his hand. Yoko Ono and John Lennon were leaving the premises to go to the studio when Chapman approached John Lennon and asked for a signature. Yoko Ono was also leaving the premises. Lennon, who is well known for his graciousness toward his followers, was the one who autographed the record. He went so far as to engage Chapman in a lengthy discourse which he took the time to consider. The photograph that was taken captured this moment, which was a horrifying snapshot of innocence taken at the precise time before a disaster took place. Chapman, on the other hand, was not the kind of fan that you would expect. Over the course of his life, he had acquired an unhealthy fascination with John Lennon, to the point that his adoration for him had turned into hate for him. He believed that John Lennon was a hypocrite, someone who preached love and peace while also living a life of wealth and power. He believed that John Lennon was a hypocrite. Over the course of this period, Chapman's mental health had deteriorated, and he had developed a growing preoccupation with the idea of murdering John Lennon. The idea that this would earn him fame was something that he was under the delusion of. His concern with the novel The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, which he carried around with him while he waited for his opportunity to act, was a contributing factor to the delusions that he was having at the time. At approximately 10:50 p.m., John Lennon and Yoko Ono made their way back to the Dakota after the studio session that they had just completed. While they were walking past Chapman, who had been lingering close to the building for the rest of the day, he screamed out, "Mr. Lennon!" Chapman had been there for the entire day. At that particular moment, Chapman pulled out a pistol with a caliber of .38 and fired 5 rounds. Lennon turned to recognize him, and Chapman fired 5 shots. John Lennon was wounded by 4 of the bullets, which caused him to receive significant injuries within his body. These injuries were sustained in the back and shoulder in particular. After stumbling up the steps that led to the door of the Dakota, leaving a trail of blood behind him, John Lennon just managed to say the words, "I'm shot," before dropping onto the ground. The scene that was taking place outside of the Dakota was one that was filled with disorder and outrage. Disarming Chapman was the first thing that Jose Perdomo, who was working as the doorman for the building at the time, did after witnessing the shooting take place. Even more astonishing is the fact that Chapman did not make any move to flee the scene. The alternative was for him to take a seat on the sidewalk in a calm and collected manner, carrying a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, which he later said was his statement. While Ono was desperately attempting to stay by her husband's side, spectators who were stunned by what had just taken place begged for assistance. Ono was straining to stay by her husband's side. When the police arrived, they immediately recognized the severity of Lennon's injuries and made the decision to transport him to Roosevelt Hospital in their patrol car rather than waiting for an ambulance to arrive. At 11:15 minutes past the hour, despite the best efforts of the medical specialists, it was determined that John Lennon had passed away upon arrival. In spite of the fact that the situation was evidently of a very high priority, this was the case. The official cause of death was ruled to be a large loss of blood, and this was determined to be the result of the gunshot wounds. John Lennon's passing was a devastating event that immediately spread throughout the world, creating widespread sorrow among people all over the world. There were vigils staged almost soon after the news came, with thousands of admirers gathering outside the Dakota to pay tribute to John Lennon and sing songs from his discography he had released. Many people from different parts of the world have expressed their sorrow over the departure of an artist whose music and message had had a significant impact on people for a considerable amount of time. She made a statement in which she requested that there be a minute of silence instead of a burial in order to honor John Lennon's intention for a small private memorial service. Yoko Ono, who was appalled by the tragedy, also delivered a statement in which she expressed her sorrow over the catastrophe. Eventually, David Chapman entered a guilty plea to the charge of second-degree murder after being brought into custody at the scene of the crime. Despite the fact that he is still detained to this day, he was given a sentence that ranged from 20 years to life in prison. His crime has been the subject of ongoing attention, which has generated conversations not only about mental illness, but also about the culture of celebrities and the responsibilities that come along with fame. The risks that are linked with the behavior of obsessive fans were brought to light by the connection that existed between Chapman's fixation on John Lennon and his desire for notoriety. A life that was dedicated to music, art, and community involvement came to an abrupt and senseless end when John Lennon was murdered. This tragedy was a symbol of the quick and senseless ending of a life. The songs Imagine, Strawberry Fields Forever, Let It Be, and All You Need Is Love are just a few examples of the wonderful tunes that John Lennon was a founding member of the Beatles and helped to the creation of throughout his time with the band. Over the course of the 1960s, he played a significant role in the process of reinventing popular music. His solo career helped to further solidify his status as a visionary, and his partnership with Yoko Ono resulted in the creation of not only experimental music, but also daring and attention-grabbing protests like the Bed-Ins for Peace. Both of these things contributed to the further consolidation of his reputation as a thought leader. Although John Lennon has passed away, his influence has remained enormous even after his death. His music continues to serve as a source of motivation for many generations, and his legacy as a voice for the cause of equality and peace will endure for generations to come. On December 8th of each year, fans from all over the world gather together to commemorate his life and work. This celebration includes either a gathering at Strawberry Fields in Central Park or participation in events that are very similar to those that take place in other parts of the world. The perpetual message of optimism that John Lennon transmitted, which is reflected in lyrics such as "You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one," serves as a reminder of the world that he envisioned and the love that he actively attempted to spread from one person to the next. The events that took place on that fateful night continue to act as a sobering reminder of the tenuous nature of life and the price that must be paid for fame. On the other hand, the legacy that John Lennon leaves behind is something that is significantly more important than the tragedy that followed his death. It would be an understatement to say that it is a monument to the transformative power of art, the everlasting impact of music, and the ageless cry for a world that is unified by peace and understanding. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.